And we are rolling on October 22nd in Comm 104, where we are discussing prisons. And we're trying to resolve the question about the United States should not incarcerate so many people. And we're about to hear from Dora.
Okay. The United States should not incarcerate so many people. To incarcerate is to imprison or confine in prisons, and the United States' current rate of incarceration is one of mass incarceration. Wildman 2012 defines it as a historically extreme rate of imprisonment concentrated among the most marginalized people. This rate is compared historically as well as between races to prove that the United States should not be incarcerating as many of the people as they are currently. The United States' current incarceration creates unjustly high rates among minority populations. African Americans are arrested for drug possession more than 3 times as often as whites, NAFO 2013. However, the reported rate of drug use is relatively similar across all races, the race being 7.7% of African Americans, 6.8% of Hispanics, and 6.6% of non-Hispanic whites. Disparity in justice, even after arrest, is apparent, with alternatives to incarceration, such as probation, being made up of 54% non-Hispanic white and only 31% non-Hispanic black, Marshak 2015. A consequence is that incarceration deprives freedom, opportunity, and perpetuates inequality. The Committee on Causes 2014 has studied incarceration's long-term consequences for public safety, those incarcerated, and the families and communities that those incarcerated return to. Former convicts lack resources for successful recovery and become severely held back economically. They experience mass unemployment, social neglect, economic abandonment, and are denied the right to vote. A criminal record reduces job prospects, and dissolved relationships result in single-parent families. Crime and inequality, therefore, become deep-rooted in these communities of concentrated high incarceration rates. Incarceration is a reality for minorities living in the United States. 1 in 5 black males can expect to be imprisoned sometime throughout adulthood, a rate 5 times higher than that for non-Hispanic whites, according to CLEAR 2013. The United States has the highest rate of incarcerating its minority populations, with more than half the prison population being black or Hispanic. In California, black adults represent 25% of all felon drug arrests, but make up just 5% of the state population. This problem of unjust quantities of minority mass incarceration exists for various reasons. Incarceration is used... First, current efforts and policies regarding incarceration are wrongly focused. Incarceration is used to control crime rate. However, studies present conflicting results and fluctuate too much to actually link the two. Between 1978 and 2004, both incarceration and violent crime rates increased. However, a study from The Economist shows that 10% increase in incarceration would actually drop 1% crime rate. Another irrelevant discussion is about shortening or lengthening incarceration sentences, because mass incarceration's negative effects are based on the prison label, not prison time. Also, according to NAFO 2013, current policies allow the federal government to deny public housing assistance to anyone convicted of a felony drug offense. Convicted students cannot receive federal financial aid or substantial education tax credits, and employers require applicants to disclose criminal histories. There's currently a high concentration also of policing in inner-city neighborhoods, and police make most of their drug arrests here. One arrest results in a prior, meaning the next arrest results in a higher sentence, producing a cumulative effect. These incarceration policies cannot be a solution because they take focus away from rehabilitation options and forgo long-term solutions of community-building opportunities in affected low-income minority areas. The problem, secondly, exists because the United States has deep-rooted ideologies that shape society and have consequences on those incarcerated. The American dream is that an individual always has the freedom and possibility to move from a lower class to a higher class, and even when this movement is recognized to be difficult, it is assumed to be possible. However, America's current system of mass incarceration takes away this possibility from a significant population of minority communities. Also, America has a long history of punishment ideology that creates a shared public reality, shaping how American society perceives and reacts to incarceration. The war on crime started in the 1960s. It is legislation that relies on enforcement, strict punishments, and policing, with little emphasis on rehabilitation or prevention. Then the war on drugs in the 1970s increased the amount of people incarcerated for drug-related crimes, increased the amount of prisons, and increased the amount of taxpayer money going to prisons. The war on drugs had 75% funding towards drug law enforcement and only 25% for prevention and treatment of the drug addictions fueling the drug market. Although races have been found to use and sell drugs at relatively equal rates, America's wars on crime and drugs have a disparate impact on inner-city minority communities. When a reality or ideology is accepted, all counter-evidence is used to support it rather than question it. The United States incarceration rate is bloated but described as falling. What is actually mass incarceration of minorities is accepted as incarceration. One solution is the push for reforms and reassessments of drug sentencing policies. Enforcement of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative should keep focus on the education of state legislators and public officials regarding mass incarceration, cost-effectiveness of corrections, and undertaking of new reforms. Reinvestment logic should be incorporated into policies so that savings could be reinvested into mass incarceration communities. Policies need to assess social services, drug treatment, healthcare, employment, and housing for those who would otherwise be imprisoned. Passing SB 649, a sentencing reform bill, would allow judges and prosecutors the option of charging people convicted of drug offenses with misdemeanors. Offenders could be sentenced to drug treatment and rehabilitation centers rather than being incarcerated. Also, the involvement of scholars and researchers in the incarceration policy reformation process would allow for evidence-based evaluations of incarceration programs and community reintegration programs. Another solution is to create the opportunity for new social consensus by permeating America's current reality. Social action requires critical consciousness of the poor and vulnerable in American society. An objective perspective is needed to re-examine the basic assumptions about the criminal justice system's role in American society. There exist examples of successful solutions in the United States, specifically at state level. The Colorado Criminal Justice Reform Coalition reverses mass incarceration in Colorado. The coalition is able to enact important legislative victories by working together with Colorado's State Commission on Criminal Juvenile Justice. They conduct public education, public research, policy analysis, community organizing, coalition building, litigation, and legislative campaigns. Success on a larger scale can be seen through an increasingly public dialogue regarding reform, through the sponsors of sentencing reform bills, researchers feeling a need to expand options of state officials, and creating a mindset among state officials for the possibility of lowering prison populations. Justice reform has the immediate advantage of giving counties the flexibility to safely lower incarceration by decreasing harsh penalties that continue to drive mass incarceration. Policy reform opportunities present potential for long-term advantages through cultural transformation. Reinvestment of resources into community-based drug treatment, rehabilitation, job and education programs are proven methods to reduce recidivism, prevent crime, and increase public safety. Providing incarcerated people and communities with the right alternatives, resources, and opportunities can infiltrate the cycle of mass incarceration. Ending mass incarceration means preventing an inflated population of incarcerated minorities. Currently, the United States unsuccessfully uses mass incarceration as a short-term solution for dealing with crime. The incarceration rate must be lowered in the short term and can be done so by breaking it down to community-level policy reforms, as well as recognizing deep-rooted realities of racism and disparity in the system, in order to naturally lower long-term social and economic consequences. The United States should not incarcerate so many people because the high incarceration rate cannot be separated from issues of social inequality and the quality of citizenship of the nation's racial and ethnic minorities. I now stand open for cross-examination and points of clarification.
8:45. Okay, who will do the cross-examination?
I don't mind.
Come up quickly. Say your name.
Hi, I'm Shevin.
Hi, Shevin.
Alright, Alright, so the first question goes, how would you
I hear
measure
you. You're trying to persuade us. Don't look at her.
how would you measure and evaluate that our incarceration rates have reached the point of so many people?
I would compare that internationally and historically, but my main focus was talking about the unjust high rate of minorities being incarcerated. So that is too many. We're incarcerating too many people of the minority population.
But with growing population, with growing crime rates, when does it reach the point where it's too many people?
I think it has reached the point where it's too many people because we've accepted it as just a rate of incarceration when actually it's a rate of mass incarceration.
So how does your proposed initiatives actually benefit the society in this case?
My proposal is to focus on the long-term benefits of rehabilitation and ending the cycle of mass incarceration.
Now, how do these benefits actually outweigh the cost of crime? Because do note that the cost of crime is not just economic in terms of money, but there are hidden costs to society, like you threaten the physical safety of society, you increase like psychological fear in society.
I think, well, using my statistics on actual crime that's being committed, being relatively similar among the races, and the incarceration rate being higher among minority populations, that shows that crime is actually not being decreased by incarcerating so many of the minority populations.
So from what you say, in this age, which is an age with high crime rates, you are willing to risk the safety of society to save that few more dollars in reducing incarceration.
I'm saying that there... Can you repeat that?
So in this age where
Last question, go.
in this age where there is high crime rates, are you willing to risk the safety of society just to save that few more dollars?
I'm saying that the crime rate is not happening among all the people who are being incarcerated. So people are being unjustly incarcerated, rather even if they're not performing these crimes.
Okay, thank you very much. You may have a seat, Siobhan. Let me talk to you really briefly.
Okay.
You need to time these things. You went way over, so you needed to cut out.
I even cut it down so much.
You cut it so much, but you need to cut even more. You did a really good job, and I thought you had some original research in here and some original ideas. I like your so many current rates of incarceration in a way of helping us get at the too many. And I thought you had real good evidence. My other suggestion to you is have a better narrative voice.
Okay.
So what is the problem, with your voice? So how big is the problem? Because when you watch yourself tonight on YouTube, you're going to see that everything is kind of the same. Nothing's emphasized. Nothing stands out. Nothing's more important than another thing. Why do we have the problem, and that sort of thing? I was intrigued by your American ideology stuff. I thought that was interesting, and the war on crime and the war on drugs. I thought that was excellent. So overall, you did a very good job. Just work on your narrative voice and your timing. Thank you. Okay, next.
Can I go first?
Yeah, free country. People are dying in Iraq, so you have freedom and liberty. Stay within the green box, yes. Yeah, that's good, okay. Rolling.
Hi everyone, my name is Vartan Gizakarna, and today
Hi, Vartan.
I will present a proposition that will be presented as a policy debate case taken from the negative stance. First of all, I want to define so many people. This phrase is key to the brief as it is essential to my argument. This phrase may mislead many into thinking that there are too many people that are being incarcerated at the moment, but I will make it clear that this is not the case. My proving that the United States should incarcerate as many people as it is, and maybe even more, will follow with me winning this debate. So what is the problem? Critics of our government rehabilitation policy argue that we should not incarcerate as many people as we do now. The United States is the world's leader in incarceration with 2.2 million behind bars, according to the Sentencing Project in 2015. Today's amount of people behind bars is about 500% more than what it was a few decades ago. Nearly 100,000 federal inmates are behind bars for drug crimes. About 500,000 are in prison for drug-related crimes. There is no question that some level of incarceration has some positive impact on bringing down crime. There are many habitual offenders and people committing serious violent crimes who may need to be kept out of society. Criminologists call this the incapitation effect. Removing someone from society prevents them from committing crimes, according to The Atlantic.
In 2015.
In 2015.
Do your job.
As we can see, we imprison many people. Although this is the case, it is justified, as I will explain why throughout my brief. What we should really do is build more space for prisoners in order to fight the current occurrence of increase in crime. Here are some statistics on recent crime that has occurred in our country. If you live in Baltimore, you may know that May, with 43 homicides, was the deadliest month since 1972. If you are a Houstonian, you've probably heard that murders were up 45% through April compared to the same period in 2014. The latest statistics in Milwaukee show a 103% strike in murders year-to-date compared with a year ago. In Atlanta, 41 people were killed in the first 5 months of this year compared with 27 in the same period last year, an increase of 52%, according to CNN 2015. Going back to the incapitation effect of criminologists, this makes us wonder if keeping the second, third, and even more than a dozen time offenders in prison would have prevented such a spike in violent crime. As we have continued our war on drugs and our imprisonment on such drug-related crimes, overall crime has decreased throughout the years. Many criminals are loose on the streets. White-collar crime is a significant issue in the United States. It is responsible for about $250 billion to $1 trillion in economic damages a year. White-collar criminals are seen as more socially acceptable and therefore are not put into prison, according to a thesis by Joseph Martinez in 2014. Declaring a war on white-collar crime will save the U.S. a tremendous amount of money that we can use to build more prisons and prisoner space. About 6,000 non-violent drug-related offenders are scheduled to be set free between October 30 of this month and November 2nd of next month, according to the Washington Post 2015. They will go onto halfway houses and home confinement. Although the majority of citizens have favored these releases, we should expect negative impacts in our communities. Many personal drug users will be less inclined to kick their drug habits due to them knowing they will have lesser punishment in return. Even though the drug offenders are non-violent and many are personal users, when they use drugs it sets a bad example for their children, which are in turn more likely to become drug offenders in the future and may become violent offenders rather than non-violent like their parents. This led me to analyze the classification non-violent. A few questions I want you all to ask yourselves is putting our children at a higher risk to use drugs and become violent offenders not bad enough to be classified as a violent crime? Is seeing blood, injury, or death done by others the only way one should be declared a violent offender? Clearly, as I have shown you, critics of our prison system are wrongfully proposing that we should not incarcerate as many people. If we follow their proposal, communities will be hurt, more criminals will be left loose and unpunished, and lastly, overall crime will increase. So how big is the problem? The problem is huge. These propositions to imprison less people put our country at risk. As stated before, there are many federal and local problems we face and the quality of our nation will in turn diminish. We should fight these criminals even stronger than before to put an end to the growing numbers in crime. According to NBC News, 2014, the federal prison population has declined for the first time in 34 years as a result of the U.S. Justice Department's effort to become less dependent on incarceration as the primary approach to reducing crime. Attorney General Eric Holder said Tuesday. Now, I would like to discuss some recent crime after this primary approach to reducing crime. Cities across the nation are seeing a startling rise in murders after years of declines. With the summer not yet over, 104 people have been killed this year after 86 homicides in all of 2014, according to the New York Times 2015. Yet with at least 35 of the nation's cities reporting an increase in murders, violent crimes are above. According to a survey, the spikes are raising alarm among urban police chiefs. Although the decline in the amount of prisons and the strong hike in crime throughout the last few years has not been definitely proven to be a causal connection, many studies correlate the two with other factors as well. Some studies say the decline in prison population along with the added fear in police officers from lawsuits for wrongdoing has caused the spike. Other studies have rejected such claims. Frankly, it is too early to put a definite answer to the spike in crime, but as trending pattern of decreasing the prison population and the increase in crime proceed, we might have a definite answer in the near future. Although there is no direct causal relationship at the moment, there is a definite answer that imprisoning more people would not increase crime. Now that there is even a slight chance that the criminals being free could have caused these increases in crime, there should be no doubt in this room that they should have been incarcerated. We need to put criminals in prison to prevent crime, and this is where I believe the huge problem falls. We are letting out once criminals out of prison onto our streets, which are far more likely to commit many different crimes. So why do we have this problem? This problem exists because of the ongoing fight against our prison policy to let criminals out of the prison system earlier than necessary. Besides the criminals' children that are more likely to commit crime by the lack of rehabilitation by their parent, by releasing prisoners out before they fully rehabilitate is a recipe for disaster. Many criminals are not ready to be back in society as they have spent a significant time behind bars, and this makes them turn to their old habits and end up back in prison. This causes our government to use police resources on repeat criminals rather than new criminals, which in turn is not economically feasible for our country and is counterproductive.
30 seconds.
This fight against imprisonment negatively affects would-be criminals and makes them more likely to commit crime as they see a gain that is more beneficial to them than the punishment. What is the solution? Rather than promoting more effective in-prison programs to better rehabilitate criminals so they will be less likely to commit crime, many appeal to their emotions. Here are some better ways we can rehabilitate criminals in order to decrease crime. Researchers at the RAND Corporation found through analysis of past studies that inmates who participate in correctional educational programs have a 43% lower chance of returning to prison than those who do not. Another program that has been highly effective amongst various prisons has been an in-prison drug program for drug offenders. These in-prison programs reduce the chance of the offender to turn to drugs, thereby reducing the chance of the offender committing crime to support his or her drug habit. Will the solution work? Previous states and prisons that have worked these programs into their prison system have seen positive effects. An example of these effects, a more effective prison system is found in the Statesman, which states instead of 156,500 prisoners behind bars in Texas, 111 state prisons a year ago, the lockup now holds just over 154,000, a drop of about 2,500 inmates according to state statistics. Another example of my proposal at work is in this article by The Fix. They state that Texas...
Okay, you need to sum up. It's over 8 minutes.
They state that the Texas Department of Correction has taken the lead by implementing a list of reforms that aims to reverse the growth of their prison population. So what are the advantages to our proposal? The economy of our country will increase. We will spend less money on resources by fighting repeat offenders and allocate money more efficiently to better rehabilitation programs for our prison system. What are the disadvantages? There are a few notable disadvantages to my proposal. One of the most important disadvantages is that when imprisonment increases as it should be, so does the rate of one's false imprisonment due to some flaws in our justice system, which is a whole separate topic to brief in itself. Although these changes in the prison system will not fill in the gap for all the flaws, it will do some good to some that exist.
Okay, I have to stop you. It's 9 minutes.
Okay.
Because you were told it was 7, and originally it was 5. Why didn't you time it?
I did. I just.
Yeah. Okay. Time for cross-check. Thank you. Who needs to do a cross-check who hasn't done one yet? And the way you adapt, folks, when you only read one of your quotes under your assertion, you get through the whole thing, and so you just adapt and move on. You read every last sentence of every last paragraph. You were determined to read the whole thing, regardless of the time signals I was giving you. Okay, begin, please. Face the audience. Thank you. Stand closer together. Yeah, good.
Why do you think there will be negative impacts of releasing nonviolent drug offenders? You said that they're likely to return to their drug habits, and will keeping them in jail fix the problem? And
What is your name?
I'm Tiffany.
Tiffany. Thank you, Tiffany.
Isn't there a drug problem in prison too? So how would incarceration solve this problem?
Leaving drug offenders out of prison will make their families and the ones they're close to more inclined to use drugs in the future. Yes, they will use some drugs in prison, but it is far less likely for them to use the same amount of drugs and have the same resources to those drugs in prison rather than outside of prison.
Also, you said that you think that having parents who use drugs would affect their children negatively and might make them fall into the habit of drug use also. So do you think that children who grow up without parents or with parents in prison, do you think that they're more likely to end up in prison? And how does your proposal prevent this perpetuated cycle?
I mean, both circumstances are unfortunate. If you have a drug addict parent or if you have no parent at all, it's unfortunate. But I believe that if you have a drug addict parent, it's worse than having no parent at all because you're directly impacted by your drug addict parent. Whereas if you have no parent, there's counselors there that can, speak to you and direct you in the right path. But if you have a drug addict parent living in the same household, you're there seeing, drug use or whatever crime that can
Monkey
occur
sees,
from your
monkey
eyes.
does.
Exactly, which I didn't actually use.
Last question.
But the fact is that the drug addiction problem will still exist in the community, and even though they're not exposed to it by their parents, they'll still be exposed to it by their community members. So I don't think mass incarceration is a solution to the root of the problem.
Right, you're right that we'll always be exposed to some type of drug, but we'll be far less exposed to these drugs.
You're persuading them, not her.
You're right that the drugs will always be in our communities and we'll be exposed to them, but we're far likely more to be exposed to drugs if we imprison the ones that are supposed to be in prison. If we let them out, you're going to see a far growing number in people turning to drugs or other bad habits.
Thank you, Tiffany. You may take a seat. I'll make this brief. You can come and see me during office hours for a more detailed critique. But what I would say is I like your basic approach, which was to say that we haven't even seen the result yet, but we're starting to see, we don't have causal studies yet, but we're starting to see some correlations of the drug murder rates and other things spiking now as we're letting more of these habitual criminals out of prison. And I appreciate somebody that doesn't mamby-pamby around and takes a position and says, as I suggested to you before with Professor Royal Oakes, who argued, that's not the only option to let more people out. You can build more prisons, you can privatize prisons. So overall, despite going overtime, you did a nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next. And please, I'll give you time signals down to try to judge how you're doing, okay? Joseph Perez, there you are. Hi, Joseph.
Hello.
And try not to wear white when you're going to be filmed.
All right.
Thank you.
So the topic we'll be resolving today is that the United States should not incarcerate so many people. I'll be taking a negative standpoint on this proposition, and the proposition will be presented as a policy debate case. I'll be defining so many people as the phrase so many people is central to the resolution of this problem. So many people will be measured by the cost of imprisonment, weighing out the benefits. I will disprove the misconception. Additionally, the phrase so many people in this resolution gives a presumption that the United States is currently incarcerating too many individuals. Therefore, as the negative, if I am able to prove that the United States is not incarcerating too many people, then I win the debate. Many argue that the United States incarcerates too many people. And Vice News has reported that the United States on average incarcerates 716 people for every 100,000, when compared to the rest of the world who average 155 per 100,000. We can see that the United States truly does incarcerate a significant amount of people. In the United States, 36 of the 50 states have higher incarceration rates than the entire country of Cuba, who has the second highest incarceration rate in the world. Now, at a glance, these statistics seem to support the initial claims we will show later, that the reasons behind imprisonment serving its purpose, and it is in turn decreases recidivism. But the real problem is not one of the number of incarcerated individuals, but more of a societal structural issue in that the educational system in lower socioeconomic regions of the country cultivates a higher rate of crime. According to a study by the University of California, Berkeley, by education raising earnings, and education also raises the opportunity cost of crime and that cost of time spent in prison. Education may also make individuals less impatient or more risk adverse, further reducing the propensity to commit crimes. In 2014, the New York Times reported that 33% of all crime in the United States occurs in young adolescents, and adults who have been brought up in and educated in lower socioeconomic regions or have minimal to no education all commit 87% of all crime. PBS also reported that in 2013, 68% of males in prison do not even have a high school diploma.
5.
And 70% of all males in prison have been brought up in foster care. There's a direct correlation with the increase in crime along with the decrease in the educational efficiency. Young individuals are thrown into a criminal cycle at a young age and simply cannot find a way out. One of these individuals reach adulthood. Most of them are incarcerated at least twice before they are 30 years of age, according to Princeton University. In fact, creating and funding after-school programs, college workshops, and ultimately a better learning environment with teachers who are willing to teach these distressed adolescents will result in lower crime rates. This in turn creates a system where, for one, we prevent young children from falling into a life of drugs and crime. Secondly, we remove the individuals committing the crime. And lastly, we begin to eliminate the high percentage of crime occurring and deterring others from doing the same in fear of similar punishment. In addition, the problem doesn't stop with our educational system, but it extends to immigration issues. When undocumented immigrants commit a crime in the United States, they are simply deported as opposed to being reprimanded for their actions. CNN has reported that earlier this week, Jose Antonio Vargas, who recently murdered a woman in San Francisco, was deported 5 times after being convicted of 4 different violent crimes. Nevertheless, he found his way back and ultimately murdered somebody. According to the Wall Street Journal, last year, in 2014, the United States deported 100,077, 960 undocumented immigrants who were convicted criminals, but 93% served less than a week in prison. In addition, any individual who consciously decides to interfere with the happiness of another citizen through committing any crime deserves to be placed in prison. In consequence, when people state that the United States has created a problem in incarcerating too many people, it establishes a preconceived notion that the incarceration is negative. That statement in itself is problematic because given that the crime rate is increasing rather rapidly, the need for prisoner reformation, the increase in educated teens, and the overall benefit of the prison system we should continue to imprison the amount of people.
3 left.
Many people believe there is a problem in the United States incarcerates, but really the problem with the government is jailing who victimize others, and secondly, the incarceration rates have steadily been decreasing in the past years. Now, Byron Tao of UC Berkeley also gave the example of 12 states who have shown exponential results in rehabilitation of inmates through their college degree programs, which allow individuals to achieve an associate's degree while in prison and also place them in job placement. Now, these rates will continually decrease over time. The Wall Street Journal writes that the decreasing in incarceration rates is a direct result of radical shift in politics, which is in current laws. Obama was quoted in an article saying we should not be tolerating overcrowding in prisons, we should not be tolerating gang activity in prison, and we should not be tolerating rape in prison. These individuals are raping people in prison. What's to say that if they're released, they won't be raping people in public?
2 left.
The reason we have the problem is the increasing crime rate exists due to our public education system in impoverished communities. In fact, Harvard University published a study which they were determined, in fact, in 2014, 39% of crime is related to drugs, 27% due to lack of moral judgment, 13% to economic conditions, and 21% to leniency of the judicial system. The leniency of the judicial system shows that we aren't incarcerating too many people, and we need to incarcerate more if the crime rates continue to escalate. So the solution to my problem is that the solution of increasing crime is to create more funding for after-school programs in lower socioeconomic regions in order to, instead of cultivating individuals that will inevitably be fed into this prison pipeline, cultivating educated individuals who have more to lose by being incarcerated while also knowing that there are various alternatives to crime. First, we can take
left.
We can take Colorado as an example, who has imposed 25% tax on marijuana and decriminalized it, lowering their crime rate and also being able to fund their educational system. According to the We Are the Drug Policy Alliance, Colorado has raised over $80 million in marijuana tax revenue, while violent crimes have decreased by 4.2% in the past year. We need to create more in-prison programs that assist with the decrease of recidivism in the current inmates.
30 seconds.
The advantages to my proposal are: the biggest advantage in our system is that overall prevention of crime. Looking back to our data, we can see the incarceration of individuals decreases crime rates substantially. Additionally, the completion of their sentence and the release back to society, prison programs like job placement and academic programs. Prisoners are allowed to earn their GED in prison. Once they've completed, they are allowed to pursue a college education if they'd like. So, on balance, without a reasonable doubt, the advantages of mass incarceration significantly outweigh the disadvantages. The ensuring of justice being served, accompanied by the peace of mind to the victims of crimes, crime rates steadily decreasing, and the increase in the rate of recidivism, is common sense to have civil society. The advantages significantly outweigh.
That's time.
All right, so now I'll stand for questions and cross-examination.
Thank you very much.
Can I do it?
Yeah, if you haven't done it.
Okay. Dora?
Dora, yeah, Dora. Where's Dora? There you are.
Okay, how do you propose to get the funding for education in low-income communities?
Look at the audience,
Through the
Dora.
decriminalization of marijuana. If we take the Colorado's example, we could raise a lot more money than $80 million in just one state throughout the entire United States.
So if you're saying you're getting it through decriminalization, does that mean less incarceration and therefore we are incriminating too many people?
Well, there's not many people in jail for marijuana charges themselves. Most of the drug offenders in prison are there for cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, and other such narcotics.
So for these low-income communities, do you see a link between, or there is a link between the incarceration rate and low-income communities, so it's being perpetuated by these people keeping on being incarcerated?
Can you repeat it again?
So these communities with low income and less education have a high incarceration rate, and it keeps being perpetuated by your proposal of keeping on incarcerating these people.
Well, it's not the incarceration that keeps them incarcerated. It's that they're not educated and they don't know another route other than doing crime. They see their parents doing it, their grandparents doing it, and they just come from a long line of criminals and they have no alternative because the teachers in the schools really don't care.
One more question.
So the incarceration label has a big impact on these communities. So do you think that rehabilitation in prison would be different than rehabilitation without the incarceration?
Definitely. Rehabilitation in prison is essential for them to actually rehabilitate, because when you have someone in an outpatient program or something of that nature, all they're doing is they're living their life how they were before. They're not even being punished for it. They report to a probation officer, blah, 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 once a month or so, where they can find ways around their drug procedures or testing and screening. So essentially, they need to be incarcerated in order to be reformed completely.
And that is time. Thank you so much. Let me give you some feedback before the battery runs out. Joseph, you took the negative side. I thought you did an admirable job of presenting it. You were a little heavy on the problem that we had. I think that you, and some of your evidence, and I'll mark it in here, that belonged in the solvency plan area, that you put the stuff about creating more after-school programs and college workshops should have been in your what's the solution and will it work? Will it work under 5 and 6? That would have gone there and been more persuasive there. But thank you for coming in under 7 minutes and doing and working it out. I thought you did a good job. Thank you. Okay, next. Hi. Oh, Rosie, I got to change the battery.